Hello everyone, this is Zeeebo and welcome to this AFK journey video. So in today's AFK journey video, I'm going to provide my first impression for Alsa based on a few hours of testing, as well as talk about whether or not this unit is free-to-play friendly, why this unit may or may not be free-to-play friendly. So before I begin talking about the unit, just a disclaimer. Number one, this is a first impression video, so the impressions will be changed if there's any major discovery as to mechanics where we can abuse for this unit, right? So number two, this unit will undergo more testing, and we will have a first impression video for this unit, which is this one, and then I'll do a full unit review, which is the how worthy is Alsa video, right? So if you guys want to wait for a more in-depth insight into the unit, you guys can wait a few more days where we fully test out the unit's ability and then release the video, and you guys can make a more sound decision for that if that's what you plan to do with your valuable resources. Okay, so point number three, for Alsa's kit, right? I don't think, okay, one question that people often ask me, is Alsa a replacement for Carolina? The answer is yes and no, right? Let me answer this part first before I begin. So for Carolina's kit, right, Carolina is a really mobile and frail damage dealer, but her damage output is way higher than Alsa's damage output. But Alsa's strength lies in her elusiveness, which I'll showcase later and talk about later from her kit itself. So is Carolina or is Alsa a replacement to Carolina? The answer is yes and no, depending on whether or not you really got Carolina built up, whether or not you want a more elusive AoE mage damage dealer. So that is the very important question that people keep on asking. Is she gonna replace Carolina? Is she gonna be more OP than Carolina? So it's yes and no, depending on how you look at things, right? If you need more damage, I think Carolina is better, right? Depending on how many enemies you're facing, I think Carolina will do more damage most of the time, because Alsa's kit is more like really AoE centric, hitting multiple targets. So if let's say you're not hitting multiple targets, her damage output might not be as high. Okay, so that's just the three disclaimers out of the way. Now let's continue with the unit run through. So for Alsa's kit, right, I'm going to run through all the skills first, and then I'm going to talk about what she wants to do or what she hopes to achieve, as well as her potential problems or the problems which I notice about her. So for Alsa's ultimate twirling rocks, she goes into a ball, move to the target tile, dealing damage to adjacent enemies. By the way, if you guys see the blue color words, right, is an additional stats which increases the damage output of your skill based on these stats known as the ultimate power or ultimate power stats. Okay, so then she enters the combat stance to the end of battle, and in combat stance, Alsa consumes 500 energy to cast vigorous slam and hits the target, then back to the original spot, dealing 260% damage and stunning them for 2 seconds. So there's a CC over here. Alsa prioritizes casting swift evasion to do 150% damage to adjacent enemies when taking damage from them, reducing their movement speed by 60% for 2 seconds. So it's as predicted from the trailer, it's a movement speed decrease. So Alsa rolls away from the attacker afterwards, gaining a shield equals to 25% of max HP for 7 seconds, and this effect can trigger once every 7 seconds at most, and she's immune to control effect when curling into a ball. So increase in the levels increases the damage output of this skill. So this skill, right, it's the most important part of a kit in terms of keeping her healthy, and this is the part where she is differentiated from Carolina, which I'll talk more about later on when I showcase in the battle itself. So next skill, we have the stone barrier. So stone barrier basically is the barrier skill where she summons the barrier to stun the enemy while creating a terrain, forcing the enemy to run around the rocks to come to her or come to your team itself. So this skill, I think it's really impactful in terms of pushing contents as well as arena, because number one, there will be more melee units in PvE contents, so you can abuse this rock pillar ability, this earth pillar ability, to force them to run around the rocks and force them to come to your unit slower. And combine that with her ultimate, she's going to be jumping around, she's going to be really elusive, so she's able to stun the enemy, right, create a terrain to force them to run around to you and then slow down their movement speed. So by the time the unit actually comes to Alsa, she probably would have her ultimate charge up, which is I'll say like key aspects of her kits, which I'll showcase later, and then she will be able to repeat this slow as well as damage from the ultimate from there. Okay, so this is for her first two skill. Then the third skill, rolling boulder, is a key part to her damage output because she's able to sense the vibration of the ley lines to locate all enemies, recently affected by CC control effects, then forms and drop rocks on them, dealing 250% damage, and increase in this skill increases the damage further. Okay, so this skill is the most highest damage dealt part of a kit, because whenever there's an enemy that's controlled, right? For example, right, let's take Iron. At the start of the battle, Iron groups all 5 of the enemies together, so all 5 of them will get immobilized if they are not immune to control, and then Alsa is able to just spawn the rocks on top of them and then drop the rocks on them. So this is the key damage portion of a kit, and you guys will see a lot of rocks being spawned later with the team as well as the runs that I'm going to showcase. So the hero focus is increase in haste and additional haste when she enters her ultimate status. So basically any hero with the increase in haste portion is gonna be useful in one way or another, because these units are usually able to do what they want at a faster rate and repeatedly do what they want in most cases. Okay, so for the EX weapon, this part I'll say EX weapon is a really important part of the kit, so I'll talk about why as we run through the ability. So Alsa increases the damage of Vigorous Slam by 50% after dealing damage with the skill, stacking up to 2 times, so you can go up to a 100% increase. At level 0, she also increases the shield value of Swift Evasion by 5% of her max HP after casting it, so this increases the survivability further. And if you increase the level of the EX weapon, you reduce the energy cost to 400 when the Vigorous Slam buff is stacked to its maximum, so it costs less to use the skill, because here it costs 500 energy, over here it only costs 400, so she's able to spam the skills more. And if you upgrade it to EX10 level 3, it reduces the cooldown to 6 seconds when the Swift Evasion buff is stacked to the maximum. So over here, right, the cooldown is 7, right? So you reduce it to 6. So it might not sound a lot at 1 second, but in a long drawn out battle of 90 seconds, you're able to spam way more. So this is quite important. And then further increase in level increases the damage output. Personally, I think EX10 will be more than sufficient. And this is the reason, right? Let me just disclaim, this is the reason why I feel that Alsa is a more pay to win centric character, because in a sense, personally, you need her EX weapon all the way to EX10 to fundamentally change how this unit works, because the ultimate is actually a very important part of a kit, and the ability to allow her to spam her ultimate is gonna be very invaluable. And if we take a look at her EX weapon stats first, right, it provides attack, right, physical, magical, defense, HP, as well as crit, which is more damage, and it gives her up to 15 haste. 15 haste, guys. 15 stats of haste is massive. Combine that with all the haste that she has in her hero focus, as well as her own base stats itself, right, she's going to be able to spam her skills pretty fast, and she's going to be able to do it repeatedly really fast as well, given the buffs from the EX weapon. So if you take a look at the EX skill, Rolling Boulder deals extra 180% damage to enemies recently affected by multiple control effects. So that's where Alsa comes in and fit into the control team in a sense, because control teams will have many ways to control the enemy, so being able to stack up multiple control effect on the enemies allows Alsa to do even more damage. Okay, so this is very important as well for her damage. So third skill as well as Enhanced Force will be the key source of her damage. The second skill is damage as well, good damage here, but it's more for the repositioning ability to keep her alive. And then we have the ultimate, which increases her survivability, and then the EX weapon, which is to buff her ultimate ability itself. So her season skill is a combo, so after casting the ultimate, allows her to do 120% damage to the current target with each of the next 4 skill casts or normal attacks. So additional damage from her. So before I do some showcase with her in the different game modes, I will just give a slight first impression verdict, and that is Alsa is more pay to win compared to being free to play, because this unit is not very useful in Dream Realm. So you don't actually get value by pulling for Dream Realm, because most of her kit requires you to control the enemy, right? Her second skill generates a rock, but the boss is not moving, so you're not going to do anything with all the barriers being introduced. And secondly, right, her third skill requires the enemy to be affected by crowd control in order for her to do this additional damage. So the thing about the bosses is they are control immune, so there's no way you can control the boss. There are a few control effects that will go through, but it's very far in between. So in most cases, right, if you take a look at her kit, she's just not very good for Dream Realm bosses. So free-to-play player, if you do invest in her, it will be more towards the arena side. And if you want to invest in her, you need to get her EX weapon to fundamentally change her kit itself. So that's important, okay? So that's why I say she's a little bit more pay to win than more free-to-play friendly. Okay, so next I'm going to showcase some matches with her. So I'm going to use this AFK progression to show her power. So the team that I think comes to everybody's mind with her is definitely the Iron as well as Arden control team. So it's quite simple. You basically switch out Carolina for her, and over here, right, I'm gonna use her to showcase this run and showcase her abilities while talking about why she is better in terms of pushing certain contents compared to Carolina. Okay, let's start the battle. So I'll go at one time. Okay, so Iron pulls everybody together, and as you guys can see, the rock starts to spawn on the enemy, and then she deal damage to them. Okay, and once she casts her ultimate, she's going to be very elusive. She's going to have this shield, going to have this slow on the enemy, which forces them to run slower towards her. And when you combine it with the fact that Iron as well as Arden as well as Damien, they have some sort of control, it synergizes really well with her kit. And you guys can see that her damage is actually really good. I'll showcase the final damage report. So this is her using her ultimate as well as her doing damage. So once she gets her ultimate off, right, she's able to actually survive better, right, and also allow your whole team to sort of survive better, because as you guys can see, the enemy is stuck behind the rock. So this is where the terrain forming ability could be really good, especially if your enemy, at least in terms of the PvE side of things, they are melee by nature and they have no way to escape the trapped terrain. So that was the best example to showcase how you can abuse the terrain. This is something which I think Carolina cannot do. But in terms of raw damage output, right, so this is the final damage output. As you guys can see, her damage output is really insane, even more than Arden, because of all the stackings of control effects, as well as her ability to just do more damage whenever your enemies get CC, when her cooldown of her third skill is done for the next cycle itself. So that's why she's a pretty insane damage dealer in terms of just the damage portion. And on top of that, I think her survivability is better. So I'm going to share this to the guild. Okay, so we have a record of this, and for this part, right, for this boss, I actually cleared it on my main account. So for the main account per se, I think I have another run. So the next run, right, I have a record. So this is my account, as you guys can see, Zeeebo over here. Okay, so I actually ran the Carolina combo. So later on, right, I'll do a comparison to the damage output as well as the runs itself. So here I'm gonna showcase the run that I did for myself, AFK stage 118. Okay, so I used Torrent, Carolina, Arden as well as Damien. Okay, so over here, right, Carolina's role is simply to just do damage. But in this map, right, as you guys can see, there's actually multiple rocks. So later on, I'll showcase Alsa to see whether or not she can do a better job, and also see whether or not she's better in terms of a more terrain build setting. Okay, I'm just gonna continue. So as you guys can see, my cycle goes through, and then my Iron pulls everybody together, and then Carolina as well as Arden is just gonna spam their skills and do damage on the back line. Okay, I'm also gonna release a video with one of my latest favorite seasonal artifact, which is the Crescent spell later on, so stay tuned for that. Okay, so this is my own run with Carolina. Okay, so next I'm gonna do it with my friends. I'm gonna do it with my friends Alsa on this account. Give me a moment. It's a little bit laggy. Okay, so the game crashed after I mentioned the loading screen. So now we are going to use the exact same positioning with Alsa in the place of Carolina. So I'll be using Granny in the front line in the place of Torrent, because I want to sort of mimic the same factional buff as my other account. So we are getting the 4-1 buff, 18%. Okay, so I'm going to put it here. Okay, so this is the lineup. Okay, so without further ado, let's start the battle. Okay, so we'll go at one time. So Iron pulls 2 of the unit all the way in the middle, and then Granny taunts 2 of them. And as you guys can see, right, like the damage output from Alsa is starting to show when you are able to do multiple controls, cause a lot of rocks will start spamming on the enemy's head, and then they'll start dropping on them, and that's where the damage comes in. That's why that's the main damage source for her. So you guys can see this terrain spawn over here is blocking the path of these units. So these units, or rather this terrain, right, is blocking the units from reaching Arden, and this could keep your units safe. This is one way to keep your units alive, but this also showcases showcase the next problem of Alsa, which is the potential survivability, because the ultimate, although it makes her more elusive, but it also sort of causes her to jump to wrong positions at time, which could cause her to die like this, as you guys can see. But it doesn't matter. I think this match showcased her utility part of the kit, the part where she's able to block out units, and somehow, right, this terrain doesn't remove itself, right? So you guys can see my Danny is trapped. So terrain as a, I'll say like as a point, could be good for your team, but at the same time it could also be very detrimental as well. So this is for the second showcase itself, and on screen right now I'm gonna showcase an arena run shared by me from another viewer. So this player ran the Mauler Rush with Alsa as one of the units inside the team comp, and he was able to find very decent success based on his sharing with me, and I can see why it's useful there, because Wilder is really a thing, and with Mauler being the factional counter combined with Elsa's elusiveness to jump around the whole map, create terrain to block out units, and then slowing units like Iron from reaching her more easily, I can see this comp working. And for arena side of things, for this account I'm not gonna do too much testing because the runs have already been consumed, but stay tuned for her how worthy video as I analyze what is probably the best comp for her in arena, as well as potentially talk about her strength in arena and give her a rating from there. Thank you very much for tuning in. Do remember to like and subscribe to see more. I'll see you guys again in my next video. Bye guys.